Right now, as Iranian missiles are actively striking Israeli soil, the streets of Tel Aviv are filling up with Israeli citizens. And they aren't rallying behind their government. They're demanding their prime minister get out. They're calling the entire military campaign against Iran a cynical political performance, engineered to keep one man in power at any cost. Some came dressed in prison uniforms with Netanyahu masks on their faces. Some carried signs with three simple words: refuse the war. And this is all unfolding in real time while Iran is executing the 74th and 75th waves of Operation True Promise 4. Ballistic missiles have already hit Arad, Diona, and the perimeter of Israel's nuclear research facility in the Negev. Hundreds of civilians were wounded in a single night of strikes. But only 3 days ago, Netanyahu was standing at a podium telling the cameras that Israel is winning decisively and Iran is being destroyed. 75 waves of Iranian retaliation make that claim impossible to defend. And the people living under those missiles are now making that point loudly, on the streets, in front of the whole world. Today, I'm going to lay out exactly what is happening inside Israel, and make the case that Netanyahu is deliberately prolonging this war to escape the one thing that threatens him more than any missile: a free election. Thursday, March 20th, hundreds of people gathered in central Tel Aviv. The event was partly organized by Alan Lee Green, a co-founder of the joint Palestinian-Jewish coalition called Standing Together. Getting there wasn't easy. Police had already shut down the original location, so the organizers pivoted and secured an underground theater that also serves as a bomb shelter. They anticipated the authorities would manufacture a safety excuse to cancel everything. They were right. When demonstrators arrived, right-wing counter-protesters and police were already waiting at the entrance. People went in anyway. Several were detained. But the statements these protesters made on camera are the kind that should be echoing across international newsrooms right now. One protester spoke without hesitation. Iran did not attack us first. We attacked them. They did not initiate this. Read that again. An Israeli citizen living in a city being struck by ballistic missiles is standing up and saying his own government fired first, not Iran. Another protester focused on the timeline. 7 months ago, Netanyahu stood before his country and declared that they had controlled Iran for generations to come. Those generations expired in 7 months. This isn't opposition framing, and these are Netanyahu's own words being delivered back to him by his own people. A woman named Teskey sat down with Democracy Now! And said something that deserves far more global attention than it's getting. She said the government has not told its citizens what the objectives of this war actually are. It hasn't said how long it will last. Millions of Israelis are inside shelters right now with no clarity on when it ends. Her words: we're fed up. We have been living in a state of war for more than 2.5 years. Let's talk about what was happening in the days just before this war started, because the timing tells you almost everything you need to know. Right before the bombs fell, diplomatic channels were moving in a direction nobody expected. A protester on the street in Tel Aviv mentioned a detail that reframes this entire conflict. In the days leading up to the campaign, Omani mediators facilitating back-channel communication between the US and Iran were describing the nuclear negotiations as unexpectedly productive, with only minor sticking points left to resolve. On February 27, 2026, one day before the strikes began, Oman's foreign minister announced a significant breakthrough. Iran had committed to never stockpiling enriched uranium and to welcoming comprehensive international inspections. The next day, Israel launched its military campaign. Sit with that for a moment. I'll come back to it. Because when I walk you through what Netanyahu said at 3 separate press conferences, you'll see exactly why that timing matters. Here's the contradiction that's sitting in the middle of Israeli society and not being reported honestly. Polling has been inconsistent, but a survey from early March put Netanyahu's political bloc and the anti-Netanyahu bloc at a dead tie, 53 seats each, with neither side anywhere near a working majority. How is the same country split this evenly? Because the war itself has public support, but the man conducting it does not, and the cruel political logic of that situation is this: as long as the war continues, forcing Netanyahu out becomes nearly impossible. Opposition leader Yair Lapid made it explicit. He publicly said he will not support any no-confidence motion while the government is fighting what he described as a just war. Alan Lee Green of Standing Together spelled out the trap for Al Jazeera. He said the opposition is fully behind the war. They say they oppose Netanyahu, not the war, but they won't face the obvious truth that the war is the only reason Netanyahu is still standing. He called it a complete failure of political leadership. Haaretz analyst Zvi Barel stated it with precision. The Iranian threat is politically useful to Netanyahu because a country at war cannot hold its leadership accountable without being accused of endangering national security. That's not political commentary. That's a documented strategy. The war functions as armor. The armor keeps the man protected, and the man stays protected for exactly as long as the armor stays on. Now, let's be specific about what Iran is actually doing. because the operational details of Waves 74 and 75 directly contradict the picture Netanyahu has been painting. Wave 74 was launched on March 22, 2026. The IRGC designated it Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen. Targets included Prince Sultan Air Base in Al-Kharj, Saudi Arabia, a key hub for American air operations targeting Iran. The U.S. Fifth Fleet headquarters in Bahrain was also struck. Iranian forces used Ghadir, Khaybar, and Khorramshahr-4 ballistic missiles to hit what they described as military bases and intelligence infrastructure in Tel Aviv, Petah Tikva, Holon, and Ramat Gan. Drone swarms targeted air facilities near Ben Gurion Airport. Wave 75 launched on March 23rd. The IRGC named it Ya Fatima al-Zahra. They stated the operation targeted newly identified Israeli military positions based on updated intelligence, and again struck Prince Sultan Air Base with ballistic missiles. 75 waves in 24 days, more than 3 significant strikes per day without pause, cycling through Fatah, Qaim, Ghadir, Khaybar, Khorramshahr-4 missile systems, and Shahed series drones. The IRGC claims 3 Israeli jets were downed, and a U.S.-Israeli armed drone was intercepted over Iranian airspace. Those specific claims haven't been independently verified, but the scale and consistency of the Iranian response is not a matter of debate. The dominant narrative frames this war as something happening primarily on Iranian soil, with Israel largely insulated from the consequences. That framing is wrong. The toll inside Israel over 3 weeks, at least 18 dead, more than 3,000 wounded. February 28th, a missile struck Tel Aviv directly, killing 1 civilian woman and wounding 22 others. March 1st, a strike on Beersheba hit a synagogue and residential buildings, killing 9 people and wounding 49. March 9th, 2 construction workers were killed by cluster munitions outside Tel Aviv. March 17th, a cluster munition hit an apartment building in Biram and killed an elderly couple in their 70s, found just outside the door of their safe room. March 22nd, missiles struck Arad and Diona near the nuclear facility, wounding more than 100 with 10 in critical condition. It was the first direct strike on the Negev nuclear site in this campaign. March 23rd, sirens across northern Israel as falling debris from an intercepted missile came down near Safed. Every single day, millions of Israelis sprint to shelters. One demonstrator in Tel Aviv said what a lot of journalists won't. 22 days, still running to shelters. No one has told us why. Now let's go through Netanyahu's own statements, because this is the part that exposes everything. March 12th, first press conference since the war began. Netanyahu announced that Israel is crushing the terror regime in Iran. He said Israel and the United States are protecting not just themselves, but the entire Middle East, and, in his words, the entire world. March 19th. He escalated the rhetoric further. Iran has no remaining capacity to enrich uranium. Iran has no remaining capacity to produce ballistic missiles. We will grind them to dust and ashes. But in that same briefing on March 19th, he quietly walked back the central promise. He admitted regime change is not guaranteed. He used this exact phrase, "You can lead someone to water, you cannot make them drink." He acknowledged that an actual overthrow would require ground forces. Trump has already publicly ruled out American boots on the ground. The strategy, stated plainly, is this: conduct airstrikes and hope that internal Iranian pressure produces a revolution. If it doesn't, nobody has said what comes next. The protesters figured this out on their own. One said every objective the government has announced is beyond reach. They won't control Iran's nuclear capability. They won't topple its government. Another went straight to the point. Netanyahu is using the war as a curtain. Behind it, his real objectives have nothing to do with Iran, and the record supports that. After the 12-day war in June 2025, he told Israelis the Iranian threat had been managed for generations. 7 months later, Israel is fighting its 3rd campaign against Iran in under a year. Iranian missiles are landing inside Israeli cities every day. The South Pars strike cannot be ignored. On March 18th, Israel bombed South Pars, the largest natural gas field on Earth, without informing Washington beforehand. Trump stated publicly that he received no advance notice. Netanyahu had to confirm it himself. His public acknowledgement: Israel acted independently on the Asaluya gas compound. President Trump asked us to pause further strikes, and we are pausing. That admission cracked open something that no official press conference was meant to show: a visible fissure in the U.S.-Israel alliance. If that fissure expands, the operational foundation of this war begins to collapse. For now, Trump has pushed back the threatened American strikes on Iran's power and energy grid by 5 days, citing what he described as very productive ongoing contacts. Iran flatly denies any such contacts occurred. Brent crude crossed $113, and U.S. crude hit $100 on fears of the Strait of Hormuz closing down, before retreating after the delay announcement. Meanwhile, a deadline Netanyahu cannot legislate away is approaching. Israeli law mandates a parliamentary election no later than October 27, 2026. The state budget deadline passed in late March. If a budget isn't passed, elections are automatically triggered within 90 days. A minister from the ruling coalition publicly acknowledged that they are working to push the vote back to June or July in order to capitalize politically on the Iran campaign. Current polling shows the two blocs tied. And on March 17th, Haaretz reported that Netanyahu is moving to dismiss the election committee's legal advisor, a step the paper characterized as an escalating attempt to compromise Israel's democratic institutions. The war provides cover. When a country is at war, demanding elections becomes something that can be labeled unpatriotic. The protesters aren't confused about any of this. One said it plainly: this war benefits one person and one government. Count the numbers yourself. Here is what was promised versus what actually happened. The promise: a rapid 4 to 5 day campaign that would break the Iranian regime. The reality: day 24, 75 waves of strikes, no collapse. The promise: the June 2025 war had ended the Iranian threat for generations. The reality: 7 months later, Iranian missiles are hitting Diona. The promise: after March 19th, Iran would have no ballistic missile capacity remaining. The reality: waves 74 and 75 struck Israeli and American targets on March 22nd and 23rd. The promise: the Iranian people would rise and remove their government. The reality: Netanyahu admitted on camera that he cannot guarantee this. The promise: this war would restore Netanyahu's legacy after October 7th and make him a figure of historical triumph. The reality: his own citizens are marching through Tel Aviv, calling the entire operation a lie, and demanding the one outcome Netanyahu is doing everything to prevent: a vote. This war has no achievable objectives. It has no defined endpoint. And the only party that comes out ahead, regardless of what happens on the battlefield, is the man who made the decision to start it. The question worth asking isn't whether Netanyahu can withstand Iranian missiles. The question is whether he can withstand Israeli citizens who have decided they've seen enough and are standing in the streets to say so. If this gave you a clearer picture of what's actually driving this conflict, hit like and let me know. Tell me in the comments, do you think this war is about protecting Israel or protecting one politician's hold on power? Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next breakdown. Share this with people who are only getting half the story. Keeping this channel independent depends on your support. See you next time. Sonnet 4.6.